finale's biggest flaw, became the comic's death sentence. How's it going, YouTube lovers? This is the Eagle Animator. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm here for another edition of Eabs Book Club, where today I am reviewing the final entry of the Murder Drones graphic novel series. So let's see how this rough journey comes to a close with the adaptation of my favorite indie animated series. So once again, it is written by White Kennedy. He wrote all of these, but this time it is illustrated by both Jomi Zhang and Gigi Jutro. So it's going to be interesting because it's going to be two art styles that were honestly pretty close, but they're a little different, but they're going to be like going back and forth mixed within this one graphic novel. So two main artists for this one, which is interesting, but it does adapt, of course, the final episode of the show, the finale absolute end, which is mostly action. So I'm nervous going into this to see how they handle it because action scenes have not necessarily been handled very well in this comic book. So let's go ahead and jump into this, because once again, I'm going to split this review into three sections like I always do. First, I'm going to go over an overview that basically is a summary of the basic plot that it follows and how it aligns with the show. Then I'm going to talk about what I didn't like, and then I'll talk about something that I think was actually pretty good. So that's the plan, but also during my outro at the beginning of it, I'm going to give an overall review of the entire series since this is the final issue, and I figured that this is the appropriate time to do it. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's get into the retelling, but before that, I need to, of course, once again, give a spoiler warning and an opinion warning. I'll be talking about in detail the entire plot of this graphic novel and the final episode of the show, and I'll be giving my personal thoughts and opinions throughout. So there you go, and with that out of the way, let's jump into this. So one final time, we start with a text stylized recap where it's an exchange between Uzi and En talking about, Sin there taking over Tessa's body and everything, but then it gets interrupted. Sin herself actually takes over the conversation. I think the first time that we've had anyone else in this conversation at the beginning of the comic besides Uzi and En, and she basically says, mocks them for their feelings for each other, and also says that she hates recaps, and then we cut to the actual comic. I think that's a fun little gimmick. Again, the text recap things haven't always been the best, but whenever they do some kind of fourth wall break like that, I think it's actually kind of entertaining, and having Sin interrupt for the finale just makes sense. But anyway, this is where the story actually begins. So Sin has begun taking apart the planet Copper 9, basically to consume it. Gravity is warping and throwing its drone inhabitants off the planet, and yellow tentacles are lashing out of the planet's core and pulling chunks of the broken planet in for Sin to feast. And watching all of this happen from above is Uzi, who, if you recall, we left floating in space at the end of the last issue, but she's also there reunited with her mom, Nori, after all this time. So Nori gets Uzi back like her choker, because apparently it's never really been fully explained in the show or the comic. Apparently it's some kind of little inhibitor or something that helps fight against the solver, even if it's not a full patch. But basically Nori explains to Uzi through text dialogue, because, there's no sound in space, explains to her that the solver needs a host. It needs some host body to actually exist in. So what they need to do is destroy Sin's core. Basically, like what Nori is, the little heart crab, that's a core. Uzi has one. All the disassembly drones have one. Sin has one as well. So that's what they need to destroy in order to defeat the solver. But before they can go off to do that, a spaceship just flies in out of nowhere and slams into Uzi, carrying her off away from her mom. And a disassembly drone tail pops out of the hatch, wraps around her arm and pulls her in. Turns out En is actually the one flying this because, he is a pilot. He was the one who flew his squad there in the first place with a crash landing, but he actually is flying the pod. And at first, Uzi is mad at him because her whole point of sacrificing herself and letting him go was to protect him so that he could get out of there. But that's not what he was going to do. Of course, he was going to go after her, so she was upset with him at first, but she can't help but show that she's happy to see him. He's the one that brings that out in her. But Sin decides to cut their reunion short because the tentacles from the core of the planet grab the pod and just rip it in half, sending Uzi and En spiraling out into a decaying orbit, plummeting towards the planet's surface. So as they're going down there, since, this might be the end for them, the two finally confess their feelings for each other and realize, yeah, we're kind of dating, aren't we? Yeah, great. But anyway, now that they've established that, they've gotten it out of the way, they're like, yeah, we've been dancing around this the whole time. Let's just say it out loud just in case we die. Uzi says it's time to murder a planet, and then they go spiraling down towards the surface to face Sin. But below them, before they get to the surface, floating in the orbit, but a little bit lower, Jay is ready to take out Khan, Thad, and Lizzie because she was on the surface when they arrived with the railgun to try to help. But because gravity is weird and stuff is happening, they can't get to the railgun right now. So Jay takes a shot at them with a missile launcher, but then someone steps in to save them. It is V riding on the Sentinel that tried to kill her, who is now wearing Bo's cowboy hat. Yeah, this moment was incredible for me in the finale. I knew she wasn't dead because, no body, no crime, but it was still awesome to give her a heroic return to be able to do that. But she goes right into attacking Jay. She calls out, her former partner and teammate for betraying the team and working with Sin. But Jay fires back saying that, oh, V, you need to grow up. If it promised you anything, look, it tricked me too. You shouldn't have believed any of that. You were silly and immature for believing it. And then she also says that there is no escape, even in death. And if you put the time to think about that line, it's one of the most depressing lines in the entire show, because it implies that Jay may have tried to escape via death and then realized that there were just backups of her everywhere, that Sin would just keep bringing her back over and over again. So it's actually a really good line for Jay, which is why I'm glad we got the special that leaned more into her character. But anyway, she's like, hey, there's no escape. You just need to join the winning team. It'll be better for everyone. And V decides to take a page out of Uzi's book and tell Jay to bite her before ripping her arm off. A little bit different from how it was in the show, but I'm not too concerned about that. It's arm injury, same concept. But just then, during that moment, Uzi and N approach to sail right past them, and Uzi sends a big blast through of null energy from her solver straight through the core of the planet, which disrupts Sin and glitches out all the tentacles that were dragging in pieces of the planet. Uzi and N, like I said, they rocket past where Jay and V are fighting, and where the rest of her friends and family are, and they crash on the planet's surface, and they get to do even a bit of a superhero landing and a pose for the camera kind of thing at the end, because of course they do. They're cringe and free. But anyway, they get there, and it's not long before Sin approaches them. She caught the null sphere that Uzi sent down, and she crushes it, putting the tentacles back in working order. And Sin, being Sin, is very creepy and approaches them. But what she also tries to do, she sends out a thing called a callback ping. And what she's trying to do is retake control of Uzi's body. But Uzi is able to fight it off, at least for now, and one more time for good measure, tells Sin to bite her. Unfortunately for her, though, Sin is more than happy to oblige that request. And she lunges at them, and she literally shoves her hand straight through Uzi's chest and rips her core out of her body. And is quick to, run in, basically, after being pushed back, run back in, attack Sin, try to get her off of Uzi and try to defend her. But he's not powerful enough to take Sin on alone. So she just rips him apart and starts digging into his chest, trying to get to his core as well. Uzi is able to regain consciousness around that time, however, and she uses her solver to get N away from Sin, and then she drags him off into a nearby building to try to take shelter so they can hide. But Sin is watching them crawl in the whole time. She's playing with her food at this point, and she soon skitters off after them to join them. So Uzi and N are in the building. They hide from Sin, and they're trying to keep quiet as Sin has a bunch of humanoid hands crawling along the walls and is crawling along, trying to send out more callback pings to find Uzi and take control of her again. But Uzi and N actually manage to stay quiet, calm down enough that they can let Sin pass, and for a moment, it seems like they managed to get away. But then the noise brings Sin back because V has arrived in the tunnel as well, looking for N. And she thinks that she sees him, but it's actually just a hologram trick being projected by Sin. So while V is trying to apologize to him, not knowing that it's not him, about everything that she did, the lying, the fact that she was, trying to hide things from him just to keep him safe, and trying to fill in on the fact that it's Sin, even though they already know that. Uzi and N are concerned because they're wondering if V is also a hologram and if this is a trap. And if they yell out, they could protect her. But if it's not her, or even if it is her, then they're going to doom themselves as well. And they're trying to figure out what to do. But N just can't let anything bad happen to V. He still cares for her, even just as a friend. And so he yells out to her that she needs to stop. But Sin hears it and plunges her hand through his chest, just like she did with Uzi, and rips out his core. Because that is just her thing at this point, is just ripping out her enemy's cores. But like after she grabs his core, she taunts V about the whole thing, about how she did a bad job and she's not keeping her end of the deal that was made. And she goes to eat N's core, which was, kill N and traumatize Uzi and V. But then she's interrupted. A door slams down on her extra limbs behind her and chops them off, causing her to lose her grip on N's core, which kind of flops and crawls away back towards his body. Turns out Khan actually gets a heroic moment in this finale because he has a universal door controller, because his power is doors, and he's able to close that door, slam on Sin, and just interrupt what was happening to keep N from dying. So I think that's actually pretty great, even just the moment in general, comic and show, and for that, because it's heavily implied in the show that N is the disassembly drone that quote unquote killed Nori, Khan's wife, Uzi's mother. And so the fact that Khan is not only using his doors to fight back after he was a coward in the beginning of the story, but the fact that he's using that ability to fight back to protect the one who, potentially killed his wife, but it's because he knows that he means something to his daughter. So I think it's a great character moment for Khan, in the show as well. There's not much that's really changed about that scene in the comic. But anyway, after that, Sin recovers and she lunges to finish the job going after N and V, but then Uzi shows up again to block them. To block the big, spiky limb, almost insect, mechanical limb that Sin has, to block it and protect them, because she's accepted who she is. She knows that she's cringe and she's free. She thinks dumb things are freaking cool, as she says, and nothing can take that away from her now. She's motivated and ready to fight. And this is when the big final battle of the whole series ensues, and the impacts from the fight cause the entire planet to shake during this. At first, Uzi is taking on Sin and Jay alone. Well, mostly Sin. Jay gets knocked out pretty easily by friendly fire and a railgun blast. But after Sin tricks Uzi into thinking that she stabbed N during a fight using another hologram, Sin and Jay try to jump Uzi while she's distracted, but that's when V and N jump back into the fight and get Jay out of the fight permanently, and now it's the trio versus Sin. And eventually, after a bunch of fighting, Uzi is able to basically turn the tides and do to Sin what she's been doing to them the entire time, and rip her core out of her chest. And before Sin can get it back, Uzi uses her null powers with the solver to basically clear a path for the sun on the other side of the planet to come through the hole in the core and burn the core, because remember, they burn in sunlight. We've established that. So she uses the sunlight to burn the core and get rid of it. But that isn't the end. The core is gone, but the world goes black and white, and what is left in Uzi's hand is this pulsating, floating, just null sphere. It's just this, looks like a black hole, just a floating sphere. And Sid's body is, Tessa's body, technically, is still moving. No lights in her eyes, moving like a zombie, reaching forward, trying to take that sphere back and consume it to regain, the solver's life, give the solver a host again in the body that it's gotten used to for these years. But Uzi knows she has to stop it, so she decides, apparently, the best course of action is to eat the sphere herself. Yep. She just eats it, which is shocking for everyone, including Sin, who puts one more little meme face before Tessa's corpse melts away, and hopefully Tessa can finally rest. I don't know, the song Forever kind of implies that she doesn't get to, which is horrible, but hopefully Tessa gets to rest after that. But anyway, that all happens. Everyone's back on the planet's surface, and N and V rush to Uzi's side, but V immediately notices that something is off about Uzi. Uzi's eyes are now glowing 2 colors. They're not just purple like they've been this whole time. It is a gradient of purple and yellow. So V, of course, is alarmed because the yellow in anyone but the disassembly drones is bad at this point, we've established. But Uzi is like, oh, I'm a damaged OC, let's go. And V goes, well, yeah, that's her. So it shows that Uzi is still Uzi. She's fine, a little bit different, a little bit more powerful, but she's still her. And after that, we jump cut to back in the bunker where Uzi is back in school and basically telling the whole story of what happened, her life story, as a big presentation for the class, showing that, here I am. Turns out nightmares are real, and I probably should have not gone out there when I wasn't supposed to. It's not so bad here, but N and V are now part of the colony as we see them in the crowd of students. Uzi's parents are reunited. We see them together, and Uzi has finally found her place in the world. So, that is the end of the story. So after all that, much like the rest of the series, this finale was a mess. Unlike other previous installments, it at least kept the basic premise of the story without changing the characters too much. Because as we know, a big issue with this series was V. She was horribly mischaracterized for most of the series, but luckily she's not here. Her scenes are pretty much left untouched for this adaptation. But still, it's not a good adaptation of the series ending, and the biggest reason for that is amplification. So it's no secret that the actual finale of the show, the episode 8 Absolute End, is not a perfect episode. I personally still like it, but I admit that it has flaws. It is far from flawless. And the biggest problem, it has a lot of micro issues, but the major issue that it has is pacing. The final episode of the show is way too fast. It jumps from scene to scene with no moments spared for the characters to have slower breathing, to allow personal interactions to have a moment of impact. It just goes, okay, the characters together and on to the next thing. It is the biggest issue with the finale. That is my personal only real issue with the finale, because I felt like that last episode hit a lot of the notes I wanted it to hit. It did a lot of the things I wanted it to do. It's just that it did it so freaking fast that it felt like a roller coaster, and you didn't have a chance to have those character moments in between. It could have used an extra 5-10 minutes in its runtime, at least. But the problem is, like I said, that's just the episode's problem. The comic has the exact same issue, which is pacing, but it is so much worse. Even the scenes that are given time in the show, the few scenes that actually have time in the show to focus on them, are really rushed in the comic. The biggest scene I was worried about in this comic is Sin's first attack on Uzi and N, because it is horrifying. It is Sin at her quintessential creepiness, makes her the perfect horror antagonist. But the problem is that in the comic, it does the bare minimum with the scenes, and it speeds through any suspenseful moments where you're supposed to sit there going, oh my gosh, my heart is racing, this is super tense, and all that tension is gone, because it just zips right through it and takes only a couple panels to actually experience it. Especially, again, the let me in scene is so horrifying, and it triggers PTSD flashbacks for N, but it really doesn't they have his flashbacks there, but because it's trying to cram it in the middle of all the other stuff going on, you don't really get the impact of it the same way you did before. You don't see in N's expression and his demeanor how it impacts him so severely. And again, Let Me In is horrific. This comic has toned down a lot of the creepiness of the show, which is a shame because it's a horror series. Horror comedy, yes, but horror. So please let it be horrific. But yeah, no, the tension is completely gone from that first attack. And also the final fight is a speed run too. I couldn't even tell, honestly, at first that they kept Uzi and Sin, at the beginning of the fight, throwing null spheres at each other that kind of spin around and shoot off and explode on the planet's surface. They do it. It is in the comic. But the way that it's drawn in the panels, and the fact that it's barely in maybe a panel and a half, it's just, you can't really tell what's going on. I know that that's what happens there because I've watched the show, but if I hadn't watched the show, I would have no idea why there was just a picture of the planet with two dark circles on it. It didn't even have the null spheres drawn in those circles, like as the explosion. It just completely speed runs through it and misses everything. It's ridiculous. But I think one of the issues also with the final fight that I really dislike, because like I said, that one's annoying because like it happens, but it's really hard to tell. The one that straight up annoys me is how Uzi defeats Sin. Because in the show, the whole point is that Uzi sees the fact that Sin is using her teleporting tricks to get behind her, and that's a trick that she's been using over and over and over again. You know, like it teleports behind you kind of thing. I mean, Liam's a weeb, of course he wrote that. But in the show, like I said, she notices that Sin is using that pattern again, and she uses that to spin around, stick her hand out, and basically Sin teleports into Uzi's hand. So her hand is already in her chest, able to rip out the core. That doesn't seem to be how it happens here. Like, she's teleporting around, yes, but the way that it's drawn and the fact that there's like only a couple panels dedicated to it, it just looks like Uzi shoves her hand through Sin's chest, like catches her lacking, basically. Which, like I said, it's basically what Sin's been doing to them the whole time, so that part of it makes sense, like actually from a narrative perspective, but it robs Uzi of showing her cleverness and her intelligence and her ability to problem solve and look at what's going on around her and figure out what she needs to do. Because that was the whole point of that scene originally in the show, is that Uzi sees it, her brain clicks and well, her mechanical brain, of course, clicks, and she goes, ah, that's what I need to try. And then she just like eyes closed, Hail Mary tries to do it. It takes that away from us in the comic. It's again, the fights were the only thing that got screen time in the finale, and they speed run those. So scenes, basically like the slow character scenes, don't even exist, basically, in this. They like Sin interrupts immediately when Uzi and En reunite, which granted she attacks pretty quickly, but there's no one moment of them even looking at each other. But so those scenes are completely non-existent, and then the fight scenes that actually got screen time are just like, oh, we get like a page dedicated to it. That's it. It's kind of, not even kind of, it's super annoying. It's just frustrating. The comic had the chance to fix the show's pacing. I think that was one thing that people were hoping was going to happen with this whole comic series, was that there was going to be a tweak to the pacing, because that was the major issue that Murder Drones had. Like, yes, people can complain that it's confusing, but as someone who, you know, grew up a Gravity Falls fan and a Bionicle fan and became a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, I'm fine with theorizing stuff. I'm fine with things being confusing and I have to look into the details. I'm totally okay with that. But the pacing was always a problem with Murder Drones, and the comic had a chance to fix that. But instead, it basically doubled down and made it so much worse. The episode's biggest flaw, the finale's biggest flaw, became the comic's death sentence. Like, seriously, it makes the comic version so much harder to follow. Because like I said, when you're reading it through solid panels, it's already a bit hard to follow than just watching it play out in front of you just by the nature of media. But when the pacing problems are worse in the comic than they are in the show, it becomes almost impossible to follow, even if you know what the story is. I feel like, honestly, knowing what the story is the only reason I was able to follow along what this comic was doing in the first place. So, put simply, it's a mess. Honestly, it was kind of hard for me to come up with anything positive to say about this comic specifically, which is sad, but I like to end all of these reviews that I've been doing here on a positive note. I don't want to end on a sour note, you know? I want to end on positivity, but it was kind of hard to come up with one for this comic. But even when that's the thing, even when I did finally figure out, oh, that's the positive I want to bring up when I was writing the script, it's still something that's inconsistent within this comic. So you know, Sin is the coolest design character in the series. Like, I've got case in point. Look at this. She's awesome. Like, it is horror incarnate. She is the perfect, terrifying villain. I love her design. Yeah, she's not my favorite character, even though I love her. V is my favorite character, but Sin's design is peak. It is the best design in the show. So I was excited to see, you know, how she's drawn in this comic, especially with two artists working on the panels in here. But the problem is, since the art is so consistently inconsistent, I think is the best way to put this. There's plenty of moments where her design looks awkward, like kind of stubby, kind of derpy, not terrifying like she should be. But I will say that when the art works, and it works great because Sin is just that kind of awesome design. So first off is the cover, which is not drawn actually by the two artists I already mentioned. The cover was drawn by artist Alessio Zana. So they did a great job. Like the cover design is just like the perfect adaptation of Sin's look, and it makes her super intimidating the way she's standing there with all the glow and the tentacles behind her and Uzi and End facing her. Like we see the backs of their heads in the foreground. The comic art cover is great. The cover is fantastic. That's the thing. In general, the cover art for all of these have been really good. I haven't talked about it too much in these. I've been mainly focusing on the art in the comic itself. But the cover art has been the only consistently good thing about this comic series. Like all of those are like, I could have that as a poster on my wall. That is gorgeous. I love it. But there are other designs. There are stuff in the panels where there's Sin drawn and it actually is really good. And the best one is so good, actually. It takes up 2 pages. It's the only time in this whole series where one piece of art takes up multiple pages of the comic. It's when Sin, first attacks Uzi and N, and she shoves Uzi's core out of her chest. So it's like, really, it's the best showcase of this whole comic of just how scary and creepy Sin is. Because remember, she is an eldritch creature hosted by a robot who is wearing a teenager's skin. She is the peak of horror design. But she doesn't really get to be super scary outside of that one frame, which is an awesome frame. It is desktop wallpaper material, but it is the only time when you see her, like, again, shoving Uzi's heart basically through her chest while N is like terrified in the background. It's great. It looks really good. It's the most horrifying panel in the entire comic, honestly. But because everything else is toned down so much, that is like the only time that she really looks scary. Because again, the let me in scene is practically non-existent. The callback ping crawl around the hallway tries to be creepy, but it just doesn't really work. It doesn't have that same punch that the show did. But that panel there, the 2-page panel we get of Sin, which is like easily could make a desktop wallpaper out of, gorgeous. It is the best example of how horrifying that she is as a villain and why she is as memorable as she was. So yeah, like I said, starting this outro with just my general thoughts on the overall series, all 7 issues if you count home, because it is now done. It has been a long journey reading all of these, but the graphic novel adaptation of Murder Drones is officially done now. I really wish I could give it a glowing review because I love, again, like I said at the beginning, it is my favorite indie animated series. I've watched a number of them on the channel at this point. I'm going to be watching a few more next month, and like October, I'm planning to watch Spooky Month. I have other things I'm going to watch. This has been my favorite so far. I love Murder Drones so much. There's a reason I want to make sure it is included. There it is in my background in multiple places. And now I have like the Sin, Animega over there. I have the full set of main character Animinies. I even have the Sin Halloween Animini here. I love Murder Drones. It is such an amazing series. I was really looking forward to this comic when they announced it, but at the end of the day, it's just not good. Like, it had its moments, and I made sure to call those out in my various reviews. It had its moments where I went, that worked really well. That was good. I liked that. I want to see more of that. But unfortunately, the bad vastly outweighed the good in this whole series. Like I said, the main part of this one, the pacing was atrocious, even worse than the main series, which is impressive. Characters were mischaracterized constantly, especially my poor V. She was massacred as a character in this comic series. And the art also kept taking huge swings in quality. It would just dip down to be horrible and then get back to really good, and you're like, oh, that's great, and then it would look crappy again. There's this part in this one, in this final issue, where it's literally the exact same artist Sin copy pasted, which I know, like, reusing frames or like that's even used in animation where you reuse something, but they didn't even color grade it to match the stuff around it. They just copy pasted the exact same drawing of Sin and plopped it onto a different background. It just looks so out of place. That's the problem with how inconsistent this art has been the whole time. It's really frustrating. But yeah, so as someone who spent quite a bit of money supporting the fundraising for this comic series, I'm disappointed. This is not what we were promised by Oni Press, and it's a terrible rendition of the show that we the fans love. I really wish I could say something more positive as a final review, but it's just not good. You know what? At least, with the money I spent, I still have some cool merch on the way. Maybe I'll do an unboxing on that when it finally gets here, hopefully by the end of the year. I just know I'm going to be wearing that Camp 98.7 hat everywhere. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that hat, because if you guys have seen my shorts where I review movies, like right out of the theater, whenever I go outside, basically, I'm wearing a ball cap. Like, I have other hats that I wear that aren't ball caps, but a ball cap is usually what you'll see me in. So getting a Camp 98.7 ball cap, it's the perfect nerdy thing where I can wear it. No one's going to know unless they know, and I'm going to love it because I know. So I'm looking forward to getting that hat in particular. But there's other cool merch as well, and like I said, I might do an unboxing. There's a jacket, there's poster arts, basically, a full collector's set of these unfortunate comics. There's some cool stuff there. I really want that hat. But there we have it. That is the full Murder Drones comic series reviewed. Despite my frustrations with the series, and like I just said, I had so many frustrations. It was really disappointing. I still had fun making these videos, and that's why I kept reviewing them like this. Because this comic series pushed me as a content creator to stop letting my Eabs Book Club series that I created just for the purpose of being able to talk about books that I've read, and I've just let it sit and do nothing with it for so long. I basically was making one video a year at that point, and it was really bad. So the fact that I got to do so many of these videos this year because of this comic series is awesome. It really pushed me to actually make all of this. And now I'm really motivated to make sure that I do not let this series go to the wayside again. I have plenty of things that I still need to read, of course, but I have plenty of things that I want to do Eabs Book Club videos on in the future to make sure this series doesn't turn, old and dusty again in between episodes. So like a big thing is that I'm currently reading the first Hello Neighbor trilogy of novels. And once I finish that, I'm going to do a review on those books, kind of like I did for the Bendy novels and for the FNAF novels. So I'm definitely going to be doing that for Hello Neighbor. I'm also considering, because I haven't read it yet, reading the Thrawn trilogy of Star Wars books. I know, and that one, I know there's two of them. I know there's two. And people are going to hate me for this, but I kind of want to read the canon one, since that's connected to the version of Thrawn that I was introduced to when I watched Rebels. That's my first experience with Thrawn. I didn't read the books before, so I kind of want to read the canon trilogy. Maybe I'll read the Legends trilogy. I have to figure that out, but I think I want to read a Thrawn trilogy and do a review on that. I'm also thinking of checking out a book called Sirens. It's written by Braden Cawthon, who is the son of the founder of Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon. So I'm curious about that, because I've liked reading like a Silver Eyes trilogy for FNAF, and I know it's Braden, it's his own thing, but it's an original story written by him, and I was curious about checking it out, so I might do that as well. And of course, thinking back to indie animation, specifically Glitch, I would love to do a review of the Meta Runner Source comic. It's a prequel comic for Meta Runner. I reacted to that whole show. It dang near made me cry at the end. I had to take deep breaths to avoid crying, because after I cried in the Murder Drones finale, I've been trying to really not cry, because it makes it just hard to record a video at that point when I turn into a blubbering mess. But I love Meta Runner. I'd love to be able to read about the backstory for Tari and get all of that taken care of. It's hard to get my hands on a copy of it, because they don't make it anymore. I really wish they would, have something good come out of this Oni Press publishing, maybe do a reprint of the Meta Runner comic. That would be nice. But either way, like I just said right there, I have a lot of stuff I want to do for Eabs Book Club. Now, I'm not going to commit to a schedule like I usually do. These videos will be done as I finish books. I will read them at my own pace and not force myself to speed through it just to appease a schedule. But I promise I am not going to let it go a year between videos again. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make sure that I try to get out multiple Eabs Book Club videos a year. I'm just like I said, not going to commit to a schedule for it, because I'm just reading it at my own pace. But there you go. That was it for the Murder Drones graphic novel. A disappointing mess of a journey, but a fun one to review nonetheless. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Please drop a like and a comment down below if you did. Or subscribe if you haven't already. See you all on the next one. Bye, guys!